The following is intended only for mature audiences. Always consult legal and medical professionals when needed. Viewer discretion is advised. You've seen them used at almost any psychic fair that you would go to. You see them used at any shop. Anybody that is using a divination tool has had their hands on these things at one point or time or another. And this evening we are going to talk about the tarot cards and oracle cards. And we're going to talk about the difference between the two. And joining this evening myself is KB Hurst and Mr. Malcolm Spears. How are you folks doing this evening?
Oh, doing fabulous.
Jolly.
There you go.
Well, it's hump day.
Yes, it's Wednesday. Oh, I know that all of us, from time to time, the three of us have used tarot, oracle, many different types of cards. But this evening we're going to focus just on the two of them, the tarot and the oracle. And I'm going to lead off just by saying, to the best of my knowledge, the major difference between the two are tarot usually are higher. They have a hierarchy. God, I couldn't even think of the word. In that hierarchy, you have, much like a deck of playing cards, the 1, 2, 3, 4, ace, king, queen, all of that. And it's very similar in any standard tarot deck, usually comprised of anywhere between, 40 cards and 72, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And each of them have 4 suits, but they have the same things. The 1, 2, 3, page, knight, queen, king, the ace, each suit is representative. And again, very much like playing cards. And oracle cards are massively different in the way that they are extremely open-ended. They don't have that same hierarchy when you turn around and you look at them, that they're not so regimented in how things are. And again, in an oracle deck, you can go anywhere in the number of cards. You could have 20, you could have 40, you could have 100. And I think most of them settle somewhere between like 25 and 50. And they're of different sizes, shapes, all kinds of things. I've seen some awesome oracle cards that are in the strangest patterns, that they're not the stereotypical playing card, rectangle. You get some that are in hearts or in stars, or they're really, really different. So tell me, if you would, Malcolm, I'm going to ask you, how long have you either studied or used tarot?
Oh my God. I don't use it a lot, but I've been at this for, I think, 45 years now. And wow. About to be 46, actually. The cards I like the best are the Rider-Waite deck, which is like the classic tarot card that, I don't know how well you can see that, but
yep.
This is the card I pulled for tonight. And I prefer those, but I have in front of me, I think 6 other decks of different oracle cards. And I'm just curious. I'm always tinkering and wanting to try new things. But I think the main difference is the older style tarot decks are linking back in the symbolism back like into the 1300s. And they've been around a long time. Whereas the oracle cards, they're not tied to that tradition. You just go with, whatever the intent of the writer or the artist is all about. But any of the oracle cards, I do the same thing for all cards. I look at the images, and I work with the images and the colors and what they tell me, what they inspire in me, mm-hmm. rather than really knowing verbatim what the cards are. I have a basic knowledge of that.
See, now, it's funny. I'm going to pause you there for a second. My son Alex, has been mm-hmm. studying. On his own, he did a reading for Pat, and Pat was just blown out of the water. He's very naturally gifted at it. And he does much the same thing. He's trying to learn what each card would mean or representative, and in a certain spread, how are they connected, all of these things. And the first time that he did a basic reading for himself, he took the pad of paper and he wrote down what he saw, and then went back and wrote down the things that the book said so he could learn. And a little while later, he comes across and he goes, Dad? I said, yeah. He goes, can cards be like pinpoint accurate? Yes. He goes, no, I mean like pinpoint accurate. I said, yes, they can be. He goes, okay. I said, why? He goes, what the book is telling me? It says there's an oil leak in my car. And honest to God, just a week before, he had gotten an oil leak in his car. He goes, so it kind of spooked me. I said, that's good. It's keeping you on your toes, but it's showing you how accurate they can be. I just found it very, very amazing. Anyhow, when you were talking about tarot, I apologize, Malcolm.
No problem. Well, when I was teaching psychic development classes, we tried all kinds of methods. And what I would do to keep it really simple, we called it instant tarot. And it's just like I described earlier. You pick up the card, and the first thing that strikes you, the first image, a part or color or whatever it is in the card, and you just zoom in on that, and then you work with your intuition. So I use it as a trigger for my intuition. Normally, I'm using birthday numerology, but I look at this as about the same way. It just kind of organizes the reading a bit, and it gives you a jumping off point. And so here's the subject. So I got the Ace of Pentacles for tonight, which is all about a great future ahead. So I thought that was pretty cool. Also, the Pentacles is nice too, because that's about money.
Yes.
So lots of success.
Kelly, what about you?
Well, I've studied tarot cards for on and off for, I would say, about 15, 16 years.
Wow.
I got into them probably about somewhere 2003, somewhere in there. And so I've been working for years trying to find a deck that I really liked. And probably about 10 years ago, I found the Crow's Magic deck by Londa Marks. I don't know if you can see. It's my all-time favorite. And I also use the Playing Card Oracles Divination deck by Anna Cortez and C.I. Freeman. It's a mother-daughter, if you can see that. But I use them together, and what I look for when I'm reading is patterns, and then it kind of tells a story, and then I can kind of see from beginning to end what the story is trying to tell me. So when I'm reading, I'm looking at it the way an intellectual would look at a literary story and try to decipher what the meaning is behind the symbolism in the story. And so for me, when I'm looking at it, I just look at not so much the colors, but I just kind of see what the pattern is trying to tell me, because there's always a beginning and an ending. With the oracle cards that I use, it seems very like in the moment. That's how I look at oracle cards, like how I see them as being more emotional and more in the moment, more than something that, it's telling a cohesive story. It's just, okay, this is how you're feeling. 1, 2, 3. Maybe you read 10 or 15 of the cards to try to develop a pattern. But like Malcolm was saying, he likes the traditional cards. I like a more traditional with a longer deck where, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to that information. So that's what I've been doing. I
had somebody read for me using Russian tarot cards.
Oh.
And they were absolutely stunning. And they were organized that you put them out in a grid. Like the person who was working with me, it was 3 by 3. So 9 cards, but visually the cards are set up that they butt into one another, and they're meant to be read like that, so that the images flow. And it was absolutely beautiful deck. I've never seen one again since then. That's a long time ago.
Wow.
I love the artwork because I feel like the person that's creating that artwork is putting some kind of emotional or spiritual aspect into it. And I think that's why I'm drawn to certain decks over other decks, is based on what they were feeling when they were creating the deck.
It's when you're talking about artwork, and again, I think we could probably all agree, like Malcolm, I pulled a card out for this evening, and mine was the Page of Cups. And it's talking about emotion and spiritual experience and things like that. But this is kind of where a lot of people start, is with the standard Rider-Waite, because it's almost, it's so nondescript on the back, but it's so plain, and yet when you start to study it, you're seeing things in the background, you're seeing things all across. And again, because it's got that hierarchy to it, you start to learn the hierarchy of the cards, and then you can change suits and then gain a little bit more knowledge as it goes along.
Well, I've known people to be really seriously into tarot cards, like Rider-Waite particularly, but they tell me that as you study the cards, you make a journey through the cards. And you actually live out all these aspects of the different cards and by the time you get through all of the cards at the end of the deck, you become a master at reading tarot cards.
I would agree with that. Shelley had an aunt more by friendship of the family than by bloodline. A lot of people that are in our area would know a reader. Her name was Susan, and her mother was Meredith. And they called her Aunt Mickey. And Mickey had just walls of cards. But she was very much that same way, that she would teach tarot and take the time to walk through every card, every suit, every deck, and talk about them and what they were meaning, and looking into the background and all kinds of things. I find that interesting, though, that somebody would say that they would be going through a spiritual journey while doing it. It sounds very much correct.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's like any other spiritual discipline. I mean, you start as with questions, and you probably end up with more questions after when you're done. But no, it's a journey. It's always a journey of self-discovery.
It takes practice for sure too. I mean, it takes a lot of practice.
The one deck that I use as an oracle deck is called the Oracle of the Grail Code. And I want to show this one. When you're talking about nuances of cards, this is called Compassion. And
I love that deck.
Yeah, it's very nice.
And it's got this lady that is looking out to sea, and out in the ocean, if we can get it just a little bit closer, is a shipwreck happening. So she's looking, and she's got compassion for what is happening out there. But this entire deck is like that. It's filled with nuance. It's filled with so many little things. And I find that to be true of almost every deck, that they are representative of much more than just a quick glance at the picture. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Would you both say that is much the same thing? And I apologize, I'm like all over the place trying to move stuff so I don't smack it around. Would you say that is true for the decks that you both use as well? That they are nuanced in nature?
You're always finding different things. Like the one I pulled tonight, which I was joking, was like the two men with beards. But if you look, one looks like the devil and one looks like a nicer non-devil type person, and so I don't know which one of you it was referring to, but...
Oh, I'm definitely the devil in that side. There's no doubt about it. Malcolm's the angel.
I didn't want to name names, Michael.
No comment.
Wait, no, I'll get my horns out.
But it's just funny because you do start to see little things in the decks when you get more familiar with them. And so that's how I feel when I look at the Crow deck, because they have so many just like numerical things in the background. There's shapes, there's circles, and it gets very mathematical a little bit, and it's very interesting. So.
Do either of you use the same layout? And again, you go back and you talk about the Rider-Waite deck, and people learn the Celtic Cross, or a very similar spread as what they start with before they advance into other things. But do either of you use the same spread or layout of your cards for both decks, or are they radically different?
I actually don't use a spread. I'll pull one, maybe two cards. That's it. I don't start making a circle or a cross or any of that, past, present, future.
Mm-hmm.
There's one that gets done on your birthday, which is, I think, 21 cards. And that's a rare one, but you need somebody who really knows what they're doing to make sense of it.
No, I would agree. Kelly?
Yeah. I actually have done. I like the Celtic cross. There's a love cross that I've used. I like to do a 7-card spread. Like when I first meet someone, if I'm reading for them, like the 7 days of the week, and then it kind of gives me an idea of how much further I need to go. And usually I'll feel an instinct. You just instinctively know how many more cards you need to pull at that point. And then usually that's when I can kind of get more familiar with what that person is trying to, like what they're going through or what it is I need to be telling them. So
it's the one thing that I found in creating a spread. Your mind starts to, I don't want to say gravitate to it, but it's like, okay, and people jump into that aspect of being a reader because the cards, here they are, and they become accustomed to starting to see patterns. And again, I think that is one of the bigger deals between Oracle and Tarot, because the Tarot, again, the hierarchy of the cards, you make connections. My father-in-law had studied with Mickey Meredith, and even he was coming back. He goes, "Oh, well, did you know?" And he would start pointing things out. He goes, "Oh, yeah, you're talking about a strong male." Okay, and this I had gotten from that. I said, "But how did you arrive at that?" He goes, "You got 3 kings in your spread." He goes, "That's very much a strong male. If you had 3 queens, a very strong female. If you had like 3 page or 3 knights, you're talking different age levels. So it's not only the cards, but a combination in that entire thing." So I'm interested, Malcolm, when you say that you're just working with 1 or 2 cards of an aspect, are you using them more as an insight into how things are going, or how are you working with that?
It basically gives me a launching point and a point of focus. So I'm starting right here, and then I go out from there. And that's basically how I use it. On rare occasions, I'll use 3 cards, like past, present, future, but generally it's 1 or 2, and it's usually like just at the start of the reading, and I'll talk to the people as to what I see, and then it starts just sparking off from there. So I just pulled a second card for myself tonight. I got the 3 of Wands, which is kind of also another cool card because it's I don't know if that shows up well. That's your ship is coming in.
See, now, and again, it's interesting because every reader has a different viewpoint or a different aspect to what they're looking at. And when he's looking and saying your ship is coming in, I'm one of the people that would say, okay, we definitely have something that is arriving into your life, and you are still looking outward, trying to find something. And Kelly, how would you look at that particular card, 3 of Wands?
I would actually see it similarly to there's something that's coming, like maybe a event or some kind of small change, like a starting off point, like a leaping point, I guess. That's how I would see that for me anyway. But I mean, like everything is subjective to how you see things. But I also think that when you're sitting in front of someone and you just, as a reader, you just kind of know instinctively in a lot of cases, what that symbol is going to mean for that person also. Like maybe it's because of what I do during the day, my day job. It's like when you're reading somebody face to face and you're looking at a card, especially if you're reading a card for someone that might be more skeptical, for instance, it's, you can usually tell what that card is saying, or if there's something that person doesn't want someone to know, sometimes that card will actually say it for them. So I don't know. That's how you guys see that sometimes. That's just for me personally, but I don't know. Everyone's different.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I was saying. And everybody has a different view. Everybody has a different style or what they've become accustomed to. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and for people that are not readers or don't use tarot or oracle, think about it very much. If I were in your kitchen and we're both going to cook scrambled eggs, we may go about it very, very differently, and yet the end result is extremely similar when we come up
Mm-hmm.
with breakfast. In all of this, when either of you started reading with tarot, oracle, or otherwise, did it shock you? Did it amaze you? Did it make you go, "Oh shit, that's a little too much"? Were they too
Somebody
accurate?
had showed me early on to take a regular deck of playing cards, and that you could mark them. I don't remember the details now. You marked them with a pen. There was different things that you added to it, and you could use it as a tarot deck. And anyway, I ended up with the Black Queen, and it landed like boom on the table.
Wow.
And I didn't have the wisdom at the time to know really what that meant. And it was talking to me about a relationship that was coming that did not go well.
Wow.
And that card was pertaining exactly to that, because I realized, you know how you get that 20/20 hindsight? Sort of like, oh, that's what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they can be really powerful, and they can be very direct.
I think I felt overwhelmed the first time I picked up a weight tarot deck. I was at Barnes and Noble, and like I've never used tarot before, but I'm like, you know what? Let me see what this is all about. And I remember taking it home and reading as best I could through this really big, long book, and not completely understanding everything it was saying. So I was like, let me just pull some cards and see what happens. And I remember the period of time of my life when that was going on. I was in a little bit of emotional turmoil, and all of the cards had water in them. And now I know, water means motion. So for me, it was more about my state of mind at the moment. It didn't necessarily, I don't remember what it was telling me future wise, but in the exact moment,
Mm-hmm.
it was all water.
You were talking about the little book that comes with tarot.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
where everybody's going, okay, they look up the card and they would look and say, well, this is what that means, and this is what. And again,
Mm-hmm.
it's where so many people begin their
Mm-hmm.
journey. The very first time I was 16 when I gave my first reading with tarot, and I gave it to a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. And it showed, and I was just going through the book and reading along with a little bit of what I thought and was seeing. And I didn't look up at him. I was too busy. I was engrossed in what I was seeing, and these things were happening. And to me, it's almost like some of the images coming alive, which gave them more meaning and more of this stuff. And I stopped to take a breath and get something to drink. I look up, and my buddy's face is absolutely stone white. He goes, how do you know all of that? I said, dude, it's right here. It's just I'm reading this book. Here, see the
Right.
book. He goes, I've never told anybody some of that. And at that
Wow.
moment, in the back of my mind, I went, well, crap, we have a problem. I said, but, he goes, no, he goes, I've never told anybody some of that. And his face was white. He goes, I have to go. And
Oh, wow.
that parked our friendship in a really hard way. And from that day forth, he and I didn't talk a whole lot. It
Oh,
was
wow.
too accurate, too spooky, too invasive for him, because he was a
Mm-hmm.
very logical kind of guy. He was interested, and up until that point, oh, this is cool. It's kind of a game. And then all the truth came out in literal black and white and right there in front of him. You can't, I didn't make it up. It's me reading this book. Look, see,
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first understanding of you'd never, unless somebody is wide open and you seriously
Mm-hmm.
need to tell them what you're seeing, you never say everything you see, because most people can't handle it.
Well, right before my father passed away 10 years ago, he knew I was really into what he would say, into that weird stuff. And my dad was completely adamant that it was all weird and it didn't mean anything. And so one day he asks me to just give him a tarot card reading because he was just curious. And I was like, Dad, I don't really feel comfortable giving you a reading because you're my dad, you're too close to me type thing. He's like, just do it. And I remember sitting there and pulling traditional 10 cards. And he, right after that, had become very ill. And there was a lot of the Tower card was another one that I remember appearing. And he was so paranoid he was going to get the death card. And I had to explain to him, that the death card doesn't mean you're dying. It's just something old is ending and, something new. And I remember him getting the tarot card and he was like, well, I'll, in his words, which I won't repeat what he said, but he was a very funny man, had a sailor mouth. But I remember it being very funny because he was like, And I remember from that point on, he didn't make fun of me as much. So I knew that some of the things that I had pulled out of the cards, it wasn't something I was just doing myself. And he watched me pull them. I shuffled and pulled them, showed them to him. I even said, here's the book. You can read it. This is what it says. And he's like, okay. Shut him right up. So but it's interesting.
I find it very awkward sometimes if people ask you a question and then they get completely freaked out when you give them an answer.
Yes.
That's happened to me more than once. It's like, well, you asked me. So, that's usually because I'm not running around open all the time. If you you start asking me questions, then I'll switch on. It seems like I'm almost an automatic reflex.
Yeah.
But, it's unfortunate when you see somebody get really scared.
Yeah.
I was reading for somebody on Monday, and she wanted to know what all these little sort of bubble lights are that were floating. She saw floating around sometimes. And the minute I explained to her that those were spirits, she got completely upset. And I'm trying to explain to her, it's because I'm like your grandfather, who is with you. Mm-hmm. And I had to really calm her down. She's getting very, very spooked. But about 30 years ago, somebody had given me a miniature Rider-Waite deck. And I was all thrilled with it because I hadn't really been in tarot that much. And actually, the door you see behind me that Pat's always annoyed if it's open, I had walked out that door. I'd been, using the cards maybe too much over a period of a month or a couple months. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, this monk just materializes in front of me, with sackcloth, with a rope around the waist and a tonsure haircut. And he looks me in the eye and he says, "Those aren't for you." And he disappeared. And I'm just standing there with my mouth hanging open, like, what?
Wow.
So I put them away for a couple of years. I figured, well, it's a pretty direct message. You can't ignore that one.
Yeah, no kidding.
That brings up an interesting question. Do either of you, have you ever experienced the point where you are working so much in the metaphysical fashion and you feel so connected and it's this nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, you wish you could live it every day, and by doing that, your physical reality starts to go to hell because you're not paying attention to it? Did that happen to either of you?
Maybe not that dramatically, but I've had small things happen, where I forget to pay a bill or something because I've been doing something for hours and it's like, oh, I've only got to midnight to do this, and I'm reading cards or I'm using my board or I'm doing something or I'm just having a conversation with someone about metaphysical topics, and then I forget to do something and it's like, oh God, but nothing major, nothing where I lost my job or something crazy happened. Not really that bad.
Yeah, I've been in that state a few times where you get more detached from the physical, but not to the point that, like Kelly was saying, not to the point where things were dangerous or it wasn't exaggerated. There was always some kind of message. Okay, be in the present moment, and usually you get a direction like that.
I would agree. It's one of those things where you have to start to understand and work on balance in both the physical reality and the metaphysical side of life. It's like Pat mentioned one time, if she doesn't pay attention and she doesn't have somebody that's her anchor while she is doing a seance, because she's older and tired, she might just absolutely go, screw it, I'm not going back. And step off into, and it's becoming more of a fear, believe it or not, with her. Not a fear, not a concern. I can't even say that. It is being cognizant that she could separate and go to hell with it. I'm going home, meaning up there. You know? It's just, I find it interesting. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to, if we can, to talk about actual dealing with tarot and how we would use them and talk with people so that if they go to a reader that they can understand versus how you would use your oracle deck. We'll be right back right after this. Coming back from... There we are. I hit the wrong button. It's one of those things. I was so busy cruising through everything. I thought I lost both of them. Like, really? No, not right now. This evening we're talking about tarot cards and oracle cards, and we're looking at nuances and differences, how they're used, what they say. Here's a big question, and I had put it in the actual description for tonight's show. Do either of you find that cards have their own energy about them?
Yes.
The individual card or the deck?
Kelly, expound on that. And
I was thinking like the deck, like when I said earlier about sometimes the person that creates the deck, what they put into the artwork, the visions that they're getting when they're putting into it. But then also, I've always been a fan of someone that gifts you tarot decks instead of you choosing them all the time, because we can just be like, oh, that's pretty, but you may not ever really connect with it. Some of the best decks that I've ever had were decks that were either suggested by a shop owner or someone that actually gave it to me, and the energy was always so much better because it had the best way I can put it is it had like a human connection attached to it, if that makes sense. There was some kind of a connection, like it had a life force behind it.
Going back into the Rider-Waite style of tarot decks, apparently that is the way to start tarot, is when somebody actually gifts you a set. And there's supposed to be a special connection and a divine connection there. And rather than buying your own. But yeah, no, I find they have energy, particularly this one, because it's the one I've used the most, Rider-Waite. And I keep them like... I got this at a Tibetan fair. It's like a silk purse. It's what I keep the bag. Oh, my daughter took one look at that and said, "Oh, you got me something." I said, no, it's from my tarot cards. And so no, I keep them like the traditional. You keep them wrapped in silk, and I did go in a box after that, and I follow all of that for the Rider-Waite. But for the oracle cards, I don't find that they have the same energy for me anyway. I think it's a personal thing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's for me. I used to keep my deck in a nice little pouch, and it was okay. And I found after a little while, the only way that I can describe this to people is they got upset. They were put away in my drawer, and they couldn't interact with all the other things and crystals and stones and whatnot that I had in my drawer. And they were upset, and they wouldn't work well. So I took them out, left them on my desk, and I put them in the desk drawer in just a nice little carved out space for them. And they worked really well after the fact. So for me, I would agree. Cards have their own energetic connection, and especially tarot. Again, because they have the hierarchy. Now, when either of you, and let's delineate for a minute and say, let's talk about tarot for a couple of minutes, and then we'll talk about oracle. I know somebody left. She dropped out. Let me fix this so people aren't looking at an absolute unknown mess. She had said that her internet at times.
Yeah, her sound was binging a little bit. One thing I find that I'm so used to hanging around with mediums and healers and other such like spiritual people is when you go to a dinner party. And somebody asks you, "So what have you been doing?" And I have since learned that you need to sort of, calm that down a little bit, because some people just aren't prepared for what you have to say.
It's the funny thing with that is because it is an oddity, like you had mentioned. People ask questions, and then they're like, "Well," and they don't want to really hear the answer. Or they don't want to believe in the answer. I'm like, folks, it doesn't really work that way.
I ended up in a situation where I was adopting a puppy. The woman who owned it couldn't really handle it, and she was wanting to give it away. Actually, it was a very psychic thing, the whole setup. But I had to go. I didn't realize I was going over to get the puppy, and I didn't realize I was walking into an interview. And there was 3 of them sitting on a couch, and they had a chair sitting there facing the couch, and they wanted to start grilling me with, well, how are you going to be a good dog owner? And then she asked me, well, what do you do for a living? So I told her, well, I'm a medium. And she says that, well, what do you see for me? Well, the minute somebody asks you a question, it just happened to open full bore. And she got really startled, and she was trying to shut me down. I wasn't realizing, because you know how you get into the energy of it and you roll? I was in that space. And she was not happy.
I can imagine why.
So I'm getting all these pings from Kelly on my phone here.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do, is getting her reconnected if we can. But it is the one thing that I've noticed as things have gone along. We were talking about tarot, and because it is such a structured. There she is. She's back.
Hello. Sorry, I don't know what happened. No idea.
There we go. I'll get everything set up here as we go along. But it is the one thing that I have noticed beyond a shadow of a doubt when we turn around and say that there are certain connections in tarot. It's doing a spread allows for that capability to see a connection from past to present to future, or to see from the past and maybe a fear point or something like that. That's not always a true connection with Oracle. Like the Celtic spread is one that I would say turns around and allows for, and again, because everybody learns on the one spread, that they can say, okay, and they learn nuances of connection points. Do you do that same kind of thing when you pull a couple of tarot cards, Malcolm?
Well, it gives a direction for sure. Like you were talking about your father-in-law, you were doing a big spread,
Yeah.
and he saw right away. He was seeing how the cards float together, and he was talking about the strong male. So if I'm doing 3 cards, yeah, it's almost always a direction in life, and that's how that's always worked for me.
Kelly,
So they're very accurate.
Does it work much the same way for you?
With the
With tarot, not so much Oracle, just with tarot.
Like I was saying before, I mean, like I don't always just go with the same spread. It does help me align with like how the first card, it's like what's the person thinking in the back of their head, and you kind of know like where the emotions and what it helps you understand an outcome, like a beginning, middle, and an end. I'm very into like scientific method, even when it comes to tarot cards, where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end of that. And I find that it's easier to recall what each position means with the tarot deck so that I can easily understand. So if I'm going back to basics, I see that spread as more like going back to basics to help you understand what it is you're trying to tell that person. Because each card represents a different aspect of the person you're reading for. So for me, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, this is, I think card 6, it's like your environmental, connected to your emotions. And, then you have 7, 8, 9, and then finally, 10 is the outcome. So I think that it helps me recall when I'm going back to tarot, if I've been away from it for a while, it helps me know where it is I need to be within that reading. So it's a good recall, but it's not something I use all the time. Sometimes, like we were saying during break, I just kind of go off the seat of my pants and go, okay, this is what we're going to do, and just kind of go with it. Kind of like reverse tarot cards, like when you pull a reverse, it's like you sometimes know whether or not you need to actually read the reverse, or sometimes it feels like it was just an accident.
Malcolm, that's a good point that you bring up. Do you read reverse tarot, or is yours just all straight up tarot?
All straight up. No, I don't go for the reverse, because traditionally the reverse is the negative aspect of the card. And that's not what I want to focus on when I'm reading with people. I want to really help people organize themselves to move into their future, to actualize themselves. And unless I'm getting like a really specific warning, I stay very positive. So no, I never use the reverse cards.
When you are dealing with tarot, do you, since you pull cards, instead of doing a spread, do you always pull the same amount, or does it differ per client? As in, you need more insight or more of a connection point, or you want or feel the need to tell them more?
It's just strictly intuitive. If I'm inspired to pull more, I'll pull more. There's really no formula for that. Strictly seat of the pants, as Kelly says.
And that makes it interesting because at that point it is such a free-flowing kind of thing that it wouldn't even be funny. It's just you literally would never really know what you're going to get, because it's such an open format. To where if people are working more in a tarot spread, whether it's, a 3-card, 5-card, Celtic Cross, there's all kinds of spreads that are out there, and people create their own. Malcolm,
sometimes
you
it's
mentioned...
just the time. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, sometimes it's just the time you have to, how long you have to do a tarot reading, where I've done small fairs before where you might only get 15 minutes. So maybe I will do like a 3 to 7 card spread, just because of time constraint, So
You mentioned time constraints. There was a lady, her name is Eileen Connolly, and she wrote 3 different books. The Apprentice, The Journeyman, and The Masters for Tarot. And in one of those books, she lays out a spread that uses all 72 of the Rider-Waite deck. And there are like 3 circles and two pillars, and then a block down below or 2 blocks. And every card, the position has a very particular meaning. And then the meaning of the card has to marry into that, as well as what's beside it, what's on top of it, what's over here. The interconnections in that reading, it takes at least a couple of hours to do that, to get it all correct. And the nuances are so complex, it's not an easy thing to do. I've done it once. Once. Alex has done it a couple of different times. And what he sees and what he can tell people is truly astounding. Because the information is spread all over the place that you can connect from here to here to here to here. But again, time, to do it right. I don't have 4 hours at a crack to devote to a single reading. That's like, oh my God. Let's switch over to Oracle for a minute. Malcolm, how do you use your Oracle? Is it are you using them like just pulling them one at a time? Or do you put 3 down?
Generally 1, sometimes 2 or 3, but mostly 1. And I'm looking for either the theme or what does this person need to know? Or just tell me something about the reading that's coming, like I did tonight for the Ace of Pentacles. It sets the tone. It's a launching place, and I use them the same way. And it's I like some of the animal spirit cards, like these ones here. I got Spirit of the Wheel, and what's this one? This one's Eagles. I always like them. It's because it's the symbolism that really speaks. And so I try all different kinds of ones, and some I like better than others. But it's a personal preference. But especially if I'm doing a phone reading, I'll just pull one to see what's happening in general, and then that just gives me a place to start.
Kelly, do you, when you are using Oracle, because they're the much more open side of things, do you do any kind of a certain spread? Do you do anything like that?
If it's for myself, I might just pull 1. If it's for somebody, like say a friend says, hey, will you pull a couple cards for me? I might pull 3 at the most, in most cases. They kind of get like an overall general kind of past, present, future type thing.
There's one that I do, and again, all of us that work on things, sometimes we have things that are given to us spiritually that we know we have to accomplish, and we end up doing them and then making it part of our everyday lives. We get booted in the butt. And I did that with what is termed the angel board reading, and it's a very set placement of cards to where each card has its own meaning in this Oracle deck that I use. And I find that the information that flows from that is just unreal. You know, in that they act similar to a tarot deck, and yet they're not, if that makes sense. They have the similarities, but you can't really make a lot of serious connections in between the two. They're more meant to give information about a particular time or event or set of events or things like that.
I find most of the oracle decks much lighter in energy than the traditional tarot deck. You know, I find the tarot deck more grounded and more solid.
How do you mean by solid?
Well, it's hard. The best way I can put it is like there's a certain weight to it, whereas I find a lot of the oracle decks, for lack of a better phrase, fluffy. It's like more air element than I find the original tarot much more grounded and much earthier. And also, like, you know, traditionally when you're playing, a lot of things have been handed down from the original tarot decks. Like when you're playing cards, the ace often in many games can be either the one, or it can be the lowest or the highest card. But what that really is about is it loops back around on itself. Because as you get to the ace, then you come back to the beginning and you restart again.
Right.
There's an awful lot of stuff in these decks.
And that's how I learned is the ace is the highest card, if you could put it that way, but it's also it signifies what the entire group is.
Yeah, the entire suit. Yeah.
Thank you. Couldn't think of the word. Here again, I'm drawing a blank. Horrible tonight.
Our brains are cold.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said our brains are cold, that's all.
Yeah. Malcolm, how warm is it up where you are?
I was just actually looking. It's -5 centigrade. Let me just switch that over. No, it's not as bad as it sounds. It is 22 degrees.
You're warmer up there than we are down here, I think.
Yeah. And it's been snowing too, so.
You can have all that.
Well, it's still warm for another couple of weeks. We start to hit the deep freeze after January.
Oh. Now, for us down here, it used to snow at the beginning of, or right around Thanksgiving, and it would snow, and then it would not go away until like March. Now it's changing. Yeah. And it's not global warming, folks. Trust me. We're not going to get into conspiracy theories this evening.
Oh, God.
We're not going to do that.
Let's not go there at all.
No. Malcolm, if somebody were starting out, would you refer them to either a tarot deck or an oracle deck to begin?
If they really wanted to work with it, I would send them straight away to the traditional tarot. Or if they were people who like to dabble and are curious and stuff like that, then I'd go with the oracle cards. Because there is all of the, like you were talking about, nuances and how the cards interact with each other. You don't really get that very much in the oracle cards. It's not as strong. So that's the difference between the two. And also people who who are serious about their tarot when they're learning, often they'll take a card either for the day or for the week and really look to see how that manifested in their life that week. And if you're looking at a card a week, you know, you're going for a year and a half to follow that particular process.
So it's
you know, these people, I mean, I've met some really, really good tarot people, and the nicest spread I've ever seen, it's a full circle, and all the cards sort of overlap each other, and it goes around in a circle, and it's a journey. And the guy started with, okay, well, this is where you are, and then he went like right around in this big loop, and it came back around on itself. So it's like the spiral you live in life. You come back around and learn the lessons, but hopefully you're at a higher level when you've come back around. And but I think the cards themselves are just cards, but it's really the people who can put the imagery together, who can interpret it, that make the whole thing. So that's what people need to learn, and that's why it takes time. If you want to be, well, it's like anything, you want to be good at it, you've got to spend some time with it and work with it.
Kelly, would you tell people to gravitate to one or another?
Like Malcolm was saying, if they're serious, then just jump right in. But I think sometimes what the Oracle does is because it does come off being a little more frilly, it's less scary to people. If they look at tarot and it might scare them, then maybe it's a gentler way to ease them into more difficult to remember or understand cards, such as the traditional deck. But I mean, I've done that, with someone that says, "Hey, what is a tarot card like?" I might just pull an oracle card out just because, I can already tell it's going to be one of those conversations where someone's like, "Ooh, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Don't you get the devil card? What's that mean? Are you a Satanist or something?" No, no.
That card gets so much misrepresentation.
I know.
I feel bad for that poor
death
card.
card as well. People almost always go,
yeah, or the hangman, the fool. There's a question from the chat room. Natasha from YouTube is asking, do you use your intuition when reading cards?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Malcolm, how so?
Absolutely. Well, the cards to me are, it just shows me where certain energies are, and then I go from there. And so what I do generally is if I'm working with cards, the same thing with numerology. It's not even 10% of what I'm doing. It just gives me a framework to work from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can go back, in through the different issues. So, yeah, it's 90% intuition.
Kelly?
I would say that definitely because of the symbols on the cards. Sometimes you might look at the picture of the card and any other time it means one thing, and then you look at it when you're sitting across from this person and it clearly means something else for that person. You can you sense it, and I mean, some of that can be learned, but some of it, I think, if we've been doing it long enough, it becomes instinctual, sixth sense. But definitely always use your intuition, always.
To me, it is like the two of you. And here again, these are the similarities that we all have. Any reader would, is having a basic understanding of what the card in and of itself means, in the suit that it is in, and then the intuitive stuff that you're getting on top of it. How is it relating to that card? How is it relating to either that or a spread? And how is it relating, all of it jammed together, to the client, the person you're talking to? So it's like this 3-ring circus that you're always trying to maintain a balance to get the information. And I know this happens to all readers. We see 10 things, and we have the intuitive, the feeling to tell you 5 of them. And we wait to see what questions you might ask, whether we will step into the other 5 or not. Because if somebody is not asking questions on one point or another, either they don't want to know, or they would not understand what you would tell them. So it's a really odd kind of thing. Natasha, that was a really good question. I appreciate that. Believe it or not, we're actually right at that hour. This, changing the format just to be able to have this conversation, the hour goes by so quick, it's not even funny. Malcolm, in finishing this evening, what would you tell people between tarot and oracle?
For me, tarot all the way. That's my preferred. And, explore it. See how it adapts to your life, how it works with your intuition. That's what I would say.
Kelly?
For me, I would say go with what you feel more comfortable with. So start with your intuition. What's drawing you in,
I'm much the same way. I agree with something that Malcolm said earlier. If you're going to work with tarot, have somebody buy the pack for you. It's massively significant that it is given as a gift. It will work much different. It will feel different. The energetics out of it will feel different. If you're going to work with just an oracle deck, then okay, go check it out, pick and see. I don't think that is so stringent on that fact. And if you walk into a store and the entire wall is populated with all stop and take a look. See what you're drawn to. What goes, hey. And don't do it visually. Do it by what you feel. If you're putting your hand out in front of it, if it feels hot or cold, pay attention and wait and see which one feels right, because that's where you're going to make the best connection. Well, folks, I'll tell you what, our time has gone by so quick. I appreciated everybody that has joined in on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and on Twitter. And for those people that are going to listen on the podcast later on, for all of it, you can find all of our shows on our YouTube. Just search for Terra Turas. On any major podcast, we have the audio version of the show on almost every major podcast site. And here on YouTube or on Facebook, we have a lot of our shows backed up for quite a while. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to drop in on our website at www.terraturas.com. Until next week, thanks for joining us this evening. And we hope that everybody has a great weekend. Take care now.
Good night, folks. Thank you.
Have a good one.